solution for things, but it's the lubricant. So it makes it possible for us to communicate great distances. I remember the days before cell phones and pagers and the internet. So before then was a very different experience to communicate with each other. Now I am connected with people that I've known for 20, 25 years, and we travel all over the world, and I can get a hold of people in any country where I know people and say, hey, I'm coming to town. Do you want to hang out? Or can I stay with you? Yeah. So there's always invitations open, always people in different places to connect with. So the technology provides some tools now that makes it easier for us to travel and for us to again kind of be liquid in the way that we're moving around and experiencing the world. And so migration, I think it's a little bit less about our traditional sense of migration that people go just from one point to another point, and more about how people can keep moving and flowing through the world and having new experiences and meeting new people and staying in new places. And maybe it's a drug. Maybe this is triggering the chemicals, and we want more and more of it.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, yeah. Do you think people eventually are looking for a home, and how does that home feels like beyond what you said about Wi-Fi? What is that really feeling in the body when you know you feel safe and grounded, secure in location?
I don't think it's as much location as it is people and community and others.
Yeah.
So there is this misconception. I think it's a misconception that people need stability and a place to be. And I think that that's a cultural misconception that actually replaces the real sense, which is connection with others. Our strength comes from our networking among other humans, not from being inside of a box, you know? So stability emotionally, psychologically comes from our interconnectivity with other humans that are enriching and having good experiences together. And this is why we can be more liquid now, because we can actually experience this in many different places. So we can experience this with different people in different places, and we don't necessarily need to have the one place. So
Mm.
there's still a cultural, conversation about this. There's a sense that this is the way, but I think this is a little bit of an old paradigm, and it will pass away as the generations change.
Mm. Right. What do you think your parents' generation and the hippie movement did well?
Hmm. Well, there are a lot of things that seem well that have, in some ways, been a little bit detrimental. I'm very interested in this generational change. I think one of the great things was it just opened up minds. It started to present a new paradigm that emerged from an industrialization. So there was definitely an industrialization that happened, from the early 1900s, where it was very structured and rigid, and people were put into these positions. And so I think from that hippie movement, kind of was definitely an opening, and we're experiencing this again now with kind of the neo hippie movement, right? It's the ebb and flow. It went like industrialization to hippie movement to tech, back to hippie movement. But this is really a re-emerging, a reopening. People are opening up to new ways again. I think that's part of the cycle, generational cycles that kind of ebb and flow. And we're experiencing this again, which is this
Mm.
opening, people exploring, looking for something different. So this is good. This is the cycle, the natural organic cycle of life, death is constantly closing and opening.
Mm.
And the opening is powerful and dangerous and wonderful, right? As creativity can be. Creativity and destruction are they go in hand, just like
Mm.
life and death go hand in hand.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
the question is, do we manage to swing without the pendulum going too far? Can we keep moving, flowing, and ebbing and flowing between this without
Yes,
it going to the extreme where it really causes major damage?
definitely. Right. And hold on to that thought. I'd like to know how you get there, but what are you working on right now? What's your current focus? Um, what is Loki?
I am enabling liquidity. So the life that I live has certain challenges. Um, when you live outside of the box, there's difficult things to deal with. The box has been constructed for us to live in comfortably, but if you want to live something that is alternative, then you come up a lot of barriers. So, this has been my life for a long time. And living this in the 2000s, especially, of course, and I'm living on my own, I had to figure out rent, work. I had to figure out how to hack together a lifestyle that would support, professionally would support how I wanted to live, right? And this was very difficult for a long time. But technology started to emerge. Some other things started to come around, and I was able to figure out how to work through it. But this lifestyle needs solutions that don't really exist right now, or have at least not existed until just recently. I like to call the pandemic the great digital baptism because it forced not just people, but actually organizations to understand that people needed to live differently. So before it was very difficult to find work or anything that allowed for that freedom. Well, once people were forced to stay home, organizations were forced to adapt, and then they had to implement systems that would support those lifestyles. And I was already working in SaaS and these other solutions for small businesses to help businesses operate remotely. So this just accelerated that. On the lifestyle side, that also has changed. And now you see, of course, Airbnb was starting to rise already before on the vacation side, but then they started to adapt and support remote workers, digital nomads, and things along these lines. So around that time, I was just thinking of setting up, a few small cabins in the forest because I wanted to be in nature. And I knew I had friends that were in this lifestyle and they needed to be able to have places to stay. So I was working on a small solution there. And then the pandemic came and it was recommended that I go bigger to support this emerging space. So Loki is essentially a portfolio of real estate holdings, geographically distributed and member owned. So it's basically a real estate portfolio with a timeshare layer on it. It's kind of the simple way we explain it. And we call them timeshares that don't suck because you actually own them. So we wanted to integrate ownership in land, stewardship in our communities, provide a community places that people could live in. But we wanted to really have these distributed as well. So there's a lot of projects similar out there that have communities, villages, even cities, startup cities, a lot of these ideas. But the key that really differentiates what we're doing is that we want to have it geographically distributed. So our community is community, but community everywhere. And so we need to have this platform and the availability for people to live this lifestyle liquidity and travel different places, stay in different properties, still benefit in a microeconomy, a circular economy way from the properties, and be able to travel around and have the variety that they want.
Yes. How does it work for someone? For example, there are two cases: a person who buys the land and becomes part of your network, and for the person that would like to live on that land.
Well, we want that to be the same one. So one of the things that I think is really important for our perspective is member ownership. So we're developing many different properties. Our members have ownership in the portfolio of all the properties, and they have access to those properties. And we use simple reservation systems so they can stay in different places, but they need to have the freedom to stay short term, medium term, long term, however long or short they want in any of those places. So for them to have ownership in it as well as the access to use it, one thing that's very important is it creates a sense of stewardship. So everybody that's using the properties that has ownership in it, they understand that connection to the place they're staying. Right? We do have a prosperity model. So one thing that's very different from, let's say, the hippie days, my parents worked on a farm. They had a farm with 125 people on it. a lot of these intentional communities, these regenerative communities, come with an approach that economics is bad and that money is the root of evil. And we actually believe that we should make a prosperity model, but make sure that prosperity is rolled back into the community and into the stakeholders outside. So we have rental abilities for public use also at properties, so that we are generating something that is officially cash flow positive, but we just make sure that flows back into our community, into the members that are owners and participants and contributors to the community, instead of just disappearing into the financial ether and banks and financial institutions.
Yes, yes. So what I'm hearing is a rental model. Is it true?
Correct. Yes. And this is the thing is, I believe very strongly love, intention, and the things that really connect us in communities are the most powerful attractants we have out there. Like, these are the things that bring us together so that we can share that human experience. But when you have groups of people, you also need mechanisms to make those things work. You have to have the tools, you have to have the systems, the operations. This is my background as an operator. So I make businesses work and I make organizations work. And even community organizations need the systems and the protocols and things that people can agree on so that they just keep working.
Sure.
So the love brings us together, the business model makes it work.
Nice,
That's pretty
well
much the idea
said.
behind it.
I'm with you.
Right.
With you, absolutely. Okay, what did it mean to you to have mom from the US and dad from EU at the time of growing up? Do you feel like you've been growing up in a set of different cultures, and were there any clashes at all? And generally, your perspective on building culture.
Oh, culture is the best, and the more the better. Variety is the spice of life.
Nice.
So, funny, interesting timing here. I'm sitting in Batam, Indonesia right now. And this is my first time to Indonesia, but this is actually where my father was born. So he was born in Borneo, Kalimantan, and left here when he was a young child, when Indonesia got their independence back. And now it kind of has come full circle, and here I am again.
Wow.
And I'm experiencing what would seem like a new culture, but I was actually raised with Indonesian culture.
Wow.
So my whole life I had Indonesian food and Indonesian history and culture as part of my life, as you can tell. But I'm actually a little bit mixed. But for myself, for the variety I've experienced, I crave the cultural experience.
Yeah.
And I think that this is how we truly experience humanity, is to experience the variety of cultural experience. In my sense, anybody who is resisting cultural mixing is seeking some sense of control. And so the way that we essentially find